we need. Please welcome veteran EIC speaker, EmpowerID founder and CEO, Patrick Parker.
Thank you, everyone. It's good to be back. Good to see a lot of familiar faces again. It's always a great time of the year to come back here. Continue the discussion, see what people are thinking, argue a lot. I think I already had a great argument with Mike from Blue this morning. I'm sure he's out there somewhere. So looking forward to keeping that going. So my talk is about AI, LLM agents, and AuthZen. And of course, AuthZen is the new OpenID specification for authorization. We've all been waiting for one for a long time, to where the policy decision points or the authorization engine can have a standard to which any application can call to get an authorization decision. And in a standard format, they can make the call, and in a standard format, they can receive a decision. So you have interoperability, you don't get locked into any vendors. So how does that play with AI, LLM agents, and all these challenges that we're dealing with? Well, if you think of an agent is not just similar to a secret agent in name. They're very similar in concepts, because when you talk to an agent, you're giving it a mission. The agent has a mission. It has the user asking it to do something. It has to use a variety of tools or gadgets or different things to try to accomplish the mission. The mission hopefully has mission parameters or guardrails, which define what is allowed to be done and not done within the mission. And at the end of the mission, you hope that if anything's compromised, anything that is risky or top secret just automatically blows up. So you have the same type of thing with an agent. An agent has tools, it has access to top secret materials, it's trying to complete a mission, and of course, just like a human top secret agent, an LLM agent has to use its brain to try to get this all done. So last year we were talking about agents and AI, and it was a relatively new concept for all of us about LLM agents and what's an agent versus what's a chatbot. Everyone's thinking chatbot, they know AI, they know what a chatbot is. An agent's a completely different thing. An agent is something that can not only talk with you and have a brain, but actually has access to tools and can do work. We definitely defined that we need guardrails to try to control what they can do and what they should not do. And that the whole idea of delegation, controlling the authorization for agents, was really, really messy, and that we were going to have to do some deep thinking on it to try to solve that problem. And I know a lot of people here are working on the same thing. We've been talking about that. So the main thing about an agent is that it has tools, just like an agent on a mission. They have all kinds of cool gadgets or tools that they need to accomplish their mission. And of course, in an authorization, you might have lots of different agents. You have the travel agent, you have the JIRA agent to book your JIRAs, and you're going to have lots of tools out there. Of course, you don't want every agent to have access to every tool. It wouldn't make any sense that there would be no constraints as to which tools are available to which agent. So you really have to add some guardrails, or else your agent could drive you over a cliff, where your travel agent all of a sudden gets access to things, and it's booking a $50,000 first-class flight, or it's deleting data off your OneDrive, and you end up with something, the enemy of us all, identity chaos, which is, we've all experienced identity chaos, different rounds of chaos. I think SharePoint, you all might remember that SharePoint was kind of data and security chaos because it can spring up everywhere. Agents are springing up everywhere. They're another form of identity chaos because agents have to act on your behalf. They have to do sensitive actions, and they need to be able to have controlled authorization to act on your behalf. And that's really where it gets sticky, because you can do some of the early lazy approaches that we're doing right now, which are not secure, which we'll talk about. But we'll get into that. So that's kind of what we were talking about last year, which was AI is not a chatbot. Tools are really what make agents do work and make them really cool, a whole new concept. They have a brain, they have tools, they can get stuff done. I kind of did a review of what are people talking about in the last 12 months since the last EIC. And the hot topics out there on LinkedIn, at the conferences, are really these technologies. So one we're going to talk about a lot, which is AuthZen, which is the standard for authorization. I think we're going to be having a little maybe meetup here, but we're doing a big one at Identiverse to implement draft 3 or draft 4. I'm not sure which they're going to call it. I saw a 4, but okay. Draft 3 specs, which extends it with some additional capabilities. And again, that's great because then it's the idea of Martin's identity fabric, that you can have an authorization engine that you're not locked into any one vendor. As long as everybody adheres to the spec, then how that vendor adds their own unique value to it, it doesn't lock you in because they're all going to be standards-based plug and play. MCP is probably the hottest thing in the last 6 months. I'm surprised that we know. I think at RSA somebody made fun of, used to be zero trust at every vendor's booth, and this year it's agents and MCP. It hasn't hit EIC yet, but I'm sure it will. So MCP solves a big thorny problem, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then some other ones, OAuth RAR, the ability to use OAuth and send more fine-grained access requests about what you're trying to do. It's big in FAPI and the financial API specification that, you don't need all the access, you don't want all the users' access to generic requests. You need to do these types of transactions. And this is important because if I'm an agent, like a travel agent, I don't need all the users' access. I need the ability to put to the actions that will get done a travel booking and nothing more. So this is the ability to pass JSON through and request a token with very fine-grained access permissions. And then, of course, out of OBO or on behalf of OAuth tokens. So the idea that you're not going to use the user's token, you're going to get that we know that this is the agent acting on behalf of the user, and this token's trackable. So it doesn't look like the user and it gets obscured who did what. You know that it's on behalf of the agent acting as the user. And then, of course, just like in the spy films, when things go wrong, you've got, you spot danger, you don't want them to get the top secret blueprints or the top secret weapons. Everything needs to blow up when things look bad. So cape and risk from the shared signals group, the ability for account level or session level detection that things don't look safe anymore. Let's just blow it all up. So the big one to talk about is MCP, because that's really, so before you had AI agents, and we knew that they could use tools. And anything could be a tool. Anything that has an API could be used by an agent to perform a task. But where we really lost a lot of time was that every agent had to wire up how to use each tool. How do I call this API? What are the parameters? How do I call this API? So you spend all your time on non-value-added tasks like just plumbing to try to use tools. Basically, what Anthropic released MCP, it's not perfect, but at least it's a standard, so it's getting adopted like crazy, is it provides like a USB-C for AI to talk to tools. So if I have an MCP server, I can expose my APIs, like let's say I'm Salesforce, I can expose my APIs that I want to, where the MCP server knows how to, which APIs it wants to expose, how to talk to those APIs, what are the parameters, how to get it done for those, and it exposes this universal thing to AI agents so they can talk to the MCP server, they can discover what's available, they can discover how to talk to it, and if these APIs change, it's dynamic. They don't have to change any agent code because they're just talking to the MCP server, which knows how things have changed. So it allows agents to seamlessly use tools because they can plug in an MCP server, discover them, and instantly know how to use these tools. So of course that sounds great, but then of course now you've given this dynamic model where I'm an agent, I plug in and I can talk to all these tools. Someone has to control, does it make sense which tools you can use? Who are you when you're using the tools? What access is going to be applied to you? So really, it really needs control. Now, in our secret agent model, Q, the quartermaster, MCP is really the quartermaster. He's not going to let you have the tools that you shouldn't have. He makes it easy for you to get the right tools for the job, and he's gonna be the one that controls it. So it's super simple to get them, but you have to go through some type of gateway. So MCP is really going to be a nice gateway layer for us to implement some authorization controls, because everything's going to plug in it. Basically, everything's going MCP. Everything in the next 12 months. My IDP has an MCP server, my PDP has an MCP server. Everything has an MCP server now, because if you want to talk to AI, that's the way to do it. So you're going to need some controls at the MCP level. So the things we want to avoid, one easy way to do it right now is, my agent acts as a user. It has the user's token. That sounds great because we don't want it to do anything the user can't do. We don't want it to see data the user can't see. We don't want it to do actions the user can't see. Well, I'm the user. I'm going to be talking to lots of agents. I don't want to give them all my permissions. I don't want them to do everything I can do. I mean, it's a travel agent. It's booking my flights. I don't want to have access to my OneDrive to delete my data. I mean, why would I want that? So you need something better. You know, filtering the data, that's great. I can only see what the user sees, but maybe I don't want it to see all the data that I can see. Or the other extreme is they just say, well, let's add a human in the loop. Well, a human has to sit there and click a button every time to approve it so that it doesn't get off track. That's not great either, because that's not automation. No one's going to want to stay up all night while these agents are running around doing things. You want control. So really, how do we address this? How do we address the hot spots? See, too many tokens or big tokens that have too much access, full user privileges everywhere, manual approval bottlenecks. So really, if we look at the hot technologies, or how do we piece together a solution using open standards, because we don't want anything proprietary. You don't want to be locked into a vendor and something they came up with that no one else is ever going to adopt. So the toolkit really this year is, what do we have to work with? We have AuthZen, that's the brain for authorization decisions. You have the on behalf of OAuth token, so we know that we're dealing with not the user's identity and not a service identity, that it's a service identity on behalf of a specific user, so you have good tracking, you have better controls. And then we have these other standards like OAuth RAR, at CAPE and risk, where you can put it all together into something that's a lot more controlled. You can hit the self-destruct button when you need to. So AuthZen, again, it's a standardized format that any application can adhere to, where it sends information about the who, the subject, the what, the resource, what are they trying to do it to, the action, what are they trying to do, and then context. Context could be, did you do MFA? Which IP address are you on? What type of browser? What type of device? Anything you want to send through that's environmental, you can send through in the PDP. You can have policies to say yes or no, and it can send back some additional information, which can be extended, where in this scenario, you can send back constraints and obligations. And that's where it gets interesting. Obligations would be, okay, I'm going to allow it, but you better log it, or maybe it should go for approval. It's an obligation that the policy enforcement point, or whoever's going to receive this and check it in the app, needs to do it. And then constraints can be, this is a fancier one, but it's basically like, yes, I'm going to let the travel agent book flights for me for 24 hours, but I only want it to book on Delta, and I only want it to spend $5,000 maximum. So it's kind of like the financial API, where you're giving it authorization to perform certain actions, but you need to constrain it. So you need the enforcement point to know more than just a yes or no decision. You need to add the constraints in so it can enforce that. So this is the brain that's going to make the decisions. The requesting engine, whether it's an MCP gateway, reverse proxy, whether it's an application, it's going to have the ability to say, okay, I'm a travel agent. I need access to solve this problem. I need to use these APIs, these tools, and and it can make a scope decision, a scope request, where then it doesn't ask for everything in the world. It's asking for something which is sending a very specifically formatted JSON that you can get approval for, where it's not going to grant you any more than you need. So it's zero trust, least privilege. And then, of course, if that's approved, we'll talk through the whole flow, then you get that on behalf of token, which can again have the data in there, the JSON payload, where it says, yes, you're allowed to act on behalf of this user. This token is only going to live for a short amount of time, and it has constraints on it. So you're not allowed to do everything. You're not allowed to spend a bunch of money. You can only do the access to these tools for this length of time with these constraints. And the other guys, then you have Kate watching the session, saying, it's kind of like the lookout. We're on the mission. You're doing a thing. They're going through the warehouse, and somebody's on the roof seeing if they spot something going wrong. And if they can send a signal and say, okay, let's blow up this session, everybody out of there. And then you have risk, which is kind of like watching out for, account level things. So basically, somebody's turned, you have a double agent, the mission's blown, you don't want to leave behind tokens, you don't want to leave behind the gadgets for the enemy. Let's blow up the whole session and extract everybody. Now I'm adding in one new concept in here, because I come from an IGA background. So you can do on behalf of tokens, and it's kind of, it's out in the ether that yes, this user, this agent, this token, but I'd like something a little bit more concrete from an IGA perspective to know that this user has delegated to this agent and as the permanent. So basically I call that the user-bound identity, where during this flow you'll see if I'm authorizing or consenting to the agent, then it creates in a graph data model. It creates a node between the user and the agent. That way we can say this user has delegated to this agent, and you can attach ABAC policies on it. So for this mission, you're only allowed to spend this much or use these tools, this mission. So it's something tangible that auditors can see exists, can be recertified, can be risk analyzed. It gives you some tangible audit trail. So that's just something new that I've added in there, but very useful for audit trails. So again, what are we trying to do? We're trying to control chaos. So we're trying to bring all these things together so that we can safely use agents, so that we know the agent did the action, we know that it didn't have all our permissions, and we know that we don't have big fat tokens floating around that could be compromised to give all the access. So I'll show you probably the better thing is just to see the flow of it, since I'm short on time. But basically, if you put it all together, this is one of those flow diagrams. So you have the user talks to the agent, it gives it the mission. The agent can formulate its raw request to say, okay, I need to use this tool, this tool, this tool. So it can generate the request to the IDP, the OAuth raw request. But then one thing right now, the IDP or the OAuth authorization server, an IDP is really meant to verify your identity, to authenticate. So an IDP is not a great spot to do authorization. To make a decision, should I allow them to use these tools? Should they be able to spend $5,000? It's not really an IDP function. So in the IDP, we have a PDP client, an AuthZen PDP client that says, hey, I'm not the brains for this. I'm going to call the PDP. The PDP then can make a decision. It can say, yes, there is a delegation between that user and that agent. It exists. It's still valid. And there is a policy that says, okay, the user consents, the user says they can spend $5,000, and it can send it back to the IDP, for the IDP then to mint the token with that data, that then the application can read and enforce those constraints and those limits. So really the integration here is that the IDP is the token engine, but it should not be the authorization engine because it doesn't have any of the facilities to make complex policy decisions. It doesn't have access to the data. It doesn't have any of that. So in this case, the IDP has a PDP client. It calls it. It gets back this token. And now you have this token delivered out to your MCP gateway, which is using it to call the tools or the agent. And of course, you have risk and CAPE monitoring in the background. So if they see anything they don't like, they can blow it all up. And that way you don't have to worry about being hacked. You're reducing the risk. You short token lifetimes, short access per token. So you have more tokens, shorter lived, with less of a blast radius. And I guess in the end, the goal is if we put all this together, we're going to be using this new brave multi-agent world where you can have autonomous work being done. You're not sitting there clicking approve constantly, but you can sleep at night because you know that they're operating within the boundaries. We've had non-human identities for a long time, and a non-human identity is kind of a different scenario than this because a non-human identity, you can give it specific permissions, and you don't have to, it doesn't have to have my permission. It's doing the things that it's allowed to do. In this case, agents are a special case because they're acting on behalf of the user. So you have the scope of, in the organization, I want to be able to constrain, in general, an agent, which tools can it use at all? Because when I have a travel agent, my enterprise might have everything exposed via MCP, but the travel agent should never be able to use tools that do not make sense for any function besides travel. So when it connects to the MCP server, you need authorization to filter which tools are returned so it doesn't see every tool in your enterprise, because that would be a very bad thing. And then when the agent is acting on behalf of the user to use those tools, you need the constraints that the user has consented, you have a delegation, and that it has only the right access for that transaction with the safeguards and the constraints that you need for that particular mission. And that's it. If you put it all together, then hopefully you have a successful mission, you'll be able to get everything done, you'll enter the brave new world of agentic automation, and you can enjoy yourself a nice little martini. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Patrick, so much for injecting that much-needed energy. I'm sure we all needed that now, and it's been quite a lot afternoon with great content. We've got a couple of questions though. Are those new specifications mostly applicable only to AI implementations, or do they also find use in general OIDC integration?
I'd say they apply generally, just like the financial industry. You're getting to where you're going to have more focused tokens for per transaction, or even one-time use tokens, because we're always trying to cut down the attack surface, the blast radius, if someone gets access to that token and tries to replay it. You don't want it to do more than it should be able to do. So this is a good practice everywhere. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Okay, well, thanks so much, Patrick.
Thank you.